Check. I'm up. Not yet. You can hear me? Wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone. Find your seat. There's enough space. The presenter also works. Hi, cool. Nice to be here. My name is Florian Barth. I'm founder and CTO of Stocard. That's my usual survey. Any users of Stocard here? More than expected. I'm going to tell you something about, well, a very flashy title, extreme scaling when in hypergrowth mode. To do some expectation management or give you an idea where we are going with that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Stocard, so you understand the hypergrowth and the scaling part. Then dig into challenges that come when you switch hypergrowth on. It's not that easy, I'm afraid. And then kind of giving you a ride through history, spiced up with war stories, failures, errors, mistakes, and other learnings that we took in the last 7 years, roundabout 6 years, 7 years. So this is the agenda, straightforward, something about Stocard, hypergrowth, what is that? How does it relate with growth? How do you engage that? And then a trip through the ages, and after that, some final words, famous last words. Let's see. Stocard, what do we do? Our mission is basically to make those things here, leather wallets, extinct. So if you're not running around with wallets in your back pocket in the next probably 10 or 5 years, I hope we took a significant part in that. We have a mobile app that allows you to digitalize, well, parts of your wallet with a strong focus on loyalty cards. So your ADAC card, your Miles & More cards, your IKEA card, etc., etc. Scan the plastic, throw the plastic away, and just use the app to scan it at the point of sale, to hunt for your rewards, hunt for your points. Yeah, more to the usage in a second. Now you got the what we do. How do we do it? We'll come to the user side in a second. From our platform and environment partners, we got a lot of nice badges, so they seem to be pretty happy with what we are doing. Quick look into our tech stack to also connect to this wonderful event over here. We have 2 mobile apps, native, Android and iOS. Our tech stack is TypeScript or Node.js running inside of wonderful Docker containers, managed in GitHub, and a pretty significant chunk of our infrastructure and of the services we consume from a lovely company called Amazon Web Service. You might know them. Again, looking at the app, what does it do? This is the very simple and the very straightforward problem that we are solving for people. You have a lot of plastic in your wallet. You want to get rid of it. Use the app, scan it, show that in your favorite IKEA, your favorite coffee shop. Get out your watch, do it on that one, get your points. That is basically more or less just getting wallet things into the digital world. Cool thing is, wallets tend to be pretty dumb, smartphones tend to be pretty smart, so you can do a lot of additional stuff around the topic of mobile loyalty. One of them is getting your favorite user information directly into your pocket. Being it your grocery catalog, so what wonderful cheese is on sale in my favorite discounter, being it wonderful closets from your favorite furniture store. Next to that, I think I often hear, well, I do not have any loyalty cards. That's good, because we also have a feature that allows basically you as a user of the app to sign up for new programs without having to scribble something into paper long forms, waiting for weeks to get your card. It's just basically filling in those gaps, first name, last name, email, or whatever, often even powered by pre-fill technology. So you can get your new loyalty card basically in seconds, and then start hunting for your points. Points is a very good thing, because Furthermore, it's always very, very synthetic and away at this point idea. But if you can have a look at your points balance, at your recent transactions, checking out if your, I don't know, your recent fill of your gas tank at the gas station is already in your points, we also support that. So much to that. Starting with the topic and the theme of hypergrowth, let's start with this wonderful slide. I always wanted to make one of those number porn slides, right? I go from top to bottom and explain to you, well, in a quick way, what this all means. So the very top, one of the metrics we look at every day is basically how much bytes of data we transfer to our lovely users per month. And if I'm not mistaken, it should be 100 trillion of those lovely bytes. Next one is the requests per month, 35 billion, sorry. Going forward, 180 million push messages that we use basically to engage our users, that we use to tell them what's happening. We facilitate 90 million point-of-sale transactions per month. Next number is a bit that it ruins kind of the optics, right? But I hated to shrink it because this is our user number, 35 million users. We support 5,000 different loyalty programs, have round about 100 different microservice classes, are a team of 50 heroes, have 6 offices all around the world, and all that in one company. Here we go, number porn slide, done. Can go off my bucket list. Hypergrowth. Hypergrowth. Especially startups like to indulge in growth and hypergrowth. And what would be more fitting than wonderful diagrams that look like hockey sticks, right? I gathered actually a lot of data, also tried to dig as deep into the past as possible. The boring thing is all of them looked like these. This is like a random assortment of installs, monthly active user sessions, revenue, post-transactions. In short, to summarize that whole thing, in the last 5 years, we more or less, and very averaging, doubled in very many, very relevant dimensions. So I'd say it's OK for me to talk about hypergrowth, or at least about growth. Many people think about that growth aspect only in terms of, well, KPIs of business models, which makes sense. But the growth, or the other part, the dark side of the growth, no, the very important part of growth, next to just doubling all your metrics, is how do you make it possible for growth to happen? How do you make that possible? Growth is much, much more than also then kind of just handling all that user, all the growth, like you can have auto-scaling and many fancy tech stuff. But the very, very important part is that your company, that means your culture, your team, your processes, how you work, everything, just the whole company is basically able to cope with that and basically, well, follow on that insane ride of growing in such a rapid pace. A cultural approach and a mindset, a philosophy that we embrace and that really helped us on that way is basically Devops. Not that Devops where you put developers and ops guys in one room and call it Devops. More or less, kind of. I found one good definition that I can align with, which is the following. So Devops basically is the philosophy, a mindset, very esoterical here, with the goal to take dev and ops, and a lot of other things too, and bake them together and unify them along very, very many different dimensions. In that quote, they mention culture, systems, practice, tool levels, but you can infinitely continue that list. And why do you want to unify that? Well, in order to create value. Value for whom? Well, in the last instance for you, but first and foremost for your, well, consumers, for your users, for your customers. you want to create a value stream, something that improves their life, or that fulfills their needs, that solves their problem. And how do you do that? By, at the one hand, accelerating how often you deliver value, and of course by just delivering that value. And you do that by, well, kind of the DevOps library of ideas and things that you can apply. We will see some of them in a few minutes. You improve the quality and thus improve the velocity. Sounds very easy. Often it is not. Very interesting topic. Not the core topic of today. If you want to dig deeper, I'm very happy to have a lot of talks offline about that. Centerpiece of DevOps is empowerment. Empowering each and everyone in your company to, well, be aware, quotes, to understand what your business is like. What is the why? Why do you do what you do? Next step then for them is like this, okay, now I know what this company thing does. How can I contribute to that? What is my part? I'm not just like some stupid gear that is spinning, but I have a mission and I contribute to the overall goal of that company. Once you are able to establish that, people can and will embrace and identify with the product, whatever your product might be. They will take responsibility for it, for their part, for the thing as a whole. How do you facilitate that? Allow people to basically be open-minded and see the big picture. Let them assume different roles, different perspectives. Give them insights into different areas. That and kind of will lead to them exchanging ideas, talking to each other, sitting together, communicating, and well, the usual startup wisdom and fail fast and often, maybe not too hard, and maybe very early, and learn from it, and then improve and learn from that, and don't fail twice the same way. The core of all that, as so often, is communication and collaboration. Basically, the solution for so many problems out there. Embracing cross-functional teams means you don't have your backend team and your Android team and your iOS team and your marketing team and your product team and your design team, but you have a mixed and cross-functional team that talks to each other, that uses like the same language, very important part, that has access to the same knowledge and also has the same goals. If you have different goals, it's very hard to work together on one thing. A lot of tooling around there. Well, create these pools of knowledge, allow people to see things, mirror that in your planning and project management. Don't plan like project manager plans, the rest does things. It's a team, agile ideas, stuff like that. Analytics, if people don't see what's happening, they won't start digging into things and seeing things, trying to understand things. They won't be able to see if they contribute at all, if their contribution is good, if they could contribute more, if they could contribute in a different way. And finally, and that's really simple, communication tools. So if email is your main communication in a company, it might make sense to look at more modern ways of communicating on the technical way, but also on the personal way. There's kind of uncontrolled coffee time talk, which is awesome, but you can also kind of try to embrace and to engage people in conversation, especially cross-functional. So that was enough evangelisting around DevOps. As I said, happy to take discussions offline. Through the ages, this is the part where I'm basically taking you on a ride from Stocard does not exist to Stocard today, and after that, a glimpse at Stocard of the future. When I thought about how to structure that, how to probably get things going, I actually had a childhood flashback. I don't know if you know or remember that little cartoony figure. So there's a kind of a series in my childhood. It was called Once Upon a Time Man, and basically dealt with kind of explaining history, explaining how the Earth was formed, how early human civilization grew to people, and there was only this funny little guy floating around and displaying the current time. From there, I went into, well, how do, I don't know, geologists and researchers look into these different ages. A wonderful diagram. What I find out, they use quite a lot of funny wording, like the Mesozoic, the Precambrian. So I took the wording and mixed it into the summary of this talk. You will see it in a second. The other way, they have this concept of eras and aeons that kind of well, compartmentalize different frames of time. And when I stumbled in Wikipedia upon that statement, eras are separated by catastrophic extinction boundaries, I was totally sold that eras are the way to go to tell you the story of Stocard. This is the quick overview of what you will see. I don't want to dig too deep, as we can directly start with the pre-AWS Zoic Aeon. This was the time before we went into Amazon Web Services. Well, the primordial soup, what did happen? We were 3 guys, we had one idea, and tried and worked on bringing that idea to life. Back then, focused on the mobile applications, makes sense. That is what people touch. That is what people will interact with. That is basically where people will get this user experience from. A lot of prototyping and testing going on. To the right, officially, and this is basically the very first version of Stocard that ran on a mobile device that we tested in a store. So we photoshopped a loyalty card of ours, put it on a white background, activated the gallery, went into I think it was a grocery store, and told the nice lady at the point of sale, please scan this. Do you, Back to the Future, this scene where Marty McFly wears the hazmat suit and has the Walkman at his father's ears, it's like just blowing him away with loud rock music. That is how she looked at us. It was this, after a bit of back and forth, she took the bravery to scan it, it beeped, we got our point, and that part of our, technical, it works somehow, checkmark list was done. I brought one other gem, which is basically following the concept of, there's this quote kind of, if you are not embarrassed by the version you are launched with, you launched too late. Gladly presenting a Stocard beta, I think 0.1, in the times when Android had no guidelines and things were really funny. This is how we actually did launch then later on. Switching over a bit into the DevOps, but more on the technical side of things area. Sorry, there was a hint that I should not show hardware on my slides, but this is hardware. This looks kind of like primordial hardware. That's why I took it. It's not one of ours. I think it's one of this large search company with G's first computers. OK, thinking of DevOps, we unified a lot of roles in us 3 people: DevOps, NetSec, Biz, and more, so DevOps checkmark. Our users grew exponentially, so really nice exponentially, like 1 and 2 and 4, and then families joined, and 8, and then grandparents needed to test it, and that's how things went crazy. Our infrastructure was a €5 vServer running PHP. Nginx, PHP, wonderful. Our tooling, our wonderful IDEs and tooling consisted of FTP, SSH, and VI. And now the highlight of the time, our continuous integration and continuous delivery pipeline was :W. So for the Emacs guys and the non-VI user, this is how you store a file in VI. So yeah, we SSH into that thing, did stupid things, saved it, and tested it. Funny enough, for the marketing slides, the PHP backend scaled 100-fold until it went up in flames, and we quickly dumped it, so 100 users. We then also switched our stack, not our stack, our infrastructure from vServers to bare metal. That made things a bit better, but in the end, well. For the sake of completeness in that aeon, this was our Amazon infrastructure. None. A little bit of old school servers next to it. And surprise, surprise, we are entering the next aeon, which is the early adoptoic aeon, and there the monolitharchian era. What does that mean? We more or less, we were very, very happy that we had the great opportunity to join the Aws Activate program, which is basically a program that delivers a lot of support to startups, allowing them to, play around with AWS and basically take their stuff over there. What did we do? Of course, we more or less migrated our bare metal into EC2. Our databases also into EC2, a bit of wiring, and we are done. Back then, we had a CouchDB, nice piece of technology. We will revisit that later on. So we consumed the insane amount of 2 AWS services. I explicitly listed the Elastic Block Store, as this is basically part of a little trip to Lisbon, where I would like to take you now. Back in the days, I visited Lisbon, surprise. This is a shot from the balcony of our Airbnb. I went there with my then girlfriend, soon-to-be fiancée, now wife. Arrived there, found our Airbnb, sitting out there, bottle of wine, nice evening, dream. And suddenly my phone rang. And I was like, who calls me in the middle of the night? Surprise, it was one of my colleagues. And what he said were very faithful 3 words. 4, sorry. Flo, the couch is full. 5 words, I miscounted. Our CouchDB was full. What does it mean? CouchDB is a append-only data store, so they don't modify their data, but they append their data. And what you need to do with the data store is to get out your broom, sweep through it, and clear up the old stuff, so you are again in a more pristine state. What happens if your cron job fails, your monitoring is not existent, and your couch is running full? You get a call in Lisbon. I spent the rest of the evening and most of the night in a telco with our little task force at home, and thanks to Elastic Block Storage, where we could actually size up that image, pre-warm all the blocks, plug things back together. It was not a total nightmare. It was still a nightmare. Well, the part with the fiancé and the wife worked out, so she didn't kick me out. But that was one of the learnings also as a takeaway. These Amazon managed managed services, being a database, being it network, being it whatever they offer, they often outperform self-hosted, self-maintained things. We will also revisit that later. Moving on. So we are still in the early adoptoic aeon, and now entering the Laarchian era. You see there's an architecture thing going on. What did we do? Step by step, we saw that having one app as a monolith is cool in the early days, to be flexible, to switch things, change things without having major cost for that. But going further, the cost of having a monolith again starts to scratch on you. So we started by basically breaking down that monolith and migrating into a layered architecture in a sense. So your classic layers like some facade for the mobile clients, a little bit of business logic, persistence, wonderful layer cake. What did it consist of? AWS services of Node. More EC2, of course, and then we added those fancy ELBs that we read back there, that these exist, to do load balancing, and very, very nice. SSL termination, a thing that we did ourselves before, which is a major pain in the handled by this wonderful ELB, perfect. And another great insight, great thing that we applied is Amazon CloudWatch. For monitoring the EC2 instances, kind of see CPU memory, etc., etc. But one of the things, and it is still in place today, were simple alerts that checked in the load balancers or in the target groups. for hosts becoming unhealthy. That was like gold. Before we were in the world where someone would run around the corner and be like, Flo, something is the back end broken. I still shudder when I hear that today. Now I get a wonderful email, I get a wonderful alert. Even our chatbot is now informing me about, and the rest of the team in the meantime, of such occasions, so we can quickly act, or it is even able to act on its own. In that time, we adopted this fancy thing with the whale, Docker. Back then, actually before it was released 1.0, we're happy when it was released 1.0, did our first experiments with it. In a sense, we did a little bit of misuse by using it more as a virtualization layer than as containerization, but starting out with Docker and getting our feet into the cold water with that, into cold and salty water with that way was a good experience. Apart from that, we introduced our trusted Stowbot, an ops chatbot that linges around in our company chat, which I would like to take as an example to dig a little bit into automation. Automation is also one of the important parts of DevOps. And also one of the reasons why I, for example, like to do stupid grunt work myself, because for me it's a good indicator to see if something needs to be automated or if it's this once in a quarter case. Customer support. Use case is often customers, back then and even now, call, drop an email, hey, did my backup arrive? So they don't trust in that little check mark that we display if the backup arrived. So process iteration 1, going too much into detail, but it involved a lot of different things. A little bit of SSHing around, 3 different curl calls, consolidating data, and in the end, sweeping. Time 5 minutes, works as soon as there's like 1 user per week. It already gets annoying with 1 user per week. Of course, as a tech-savvy person, what do? You create a script for that. So we created a bash script for the SSH stuff, a node script to check all that. Reduce the time to 1 minute. That basically holds until you hit insert random number user per month, that when it starts to get annoying. And then we had basically the epiphany, wait, we have that Stowbot. We use it for deploying our service. But that concept of chatting with someone is really accessible even for non-tech savvy users. So what we did is basically teach our Stowbot to use these scripts. And what you do now is basically ask the Stowbot to check for that backup. And then he said, yeah, I found it. It was stored at time X and has 7 cards. Tell that to our lovely customer. Reduce the time basically to 0, near real time, made our wonderful customer support happy, and made me happy as I did not have to do any scripting or anything else anymore. Automation, very important, is especially if you're careful in growing your team, which you should. All right, an extinction barrier approaching. Kidding. Microservoic Aeon, the name says it all. At one point in time, from breaking up into layers, we broke them further into microservices. In this iteration, talking REST. This is kind of the overview, breakdown. How did we implement things? What different parts did we use? Especially, probably for you relevant, which parts of AWS services did we consume? For routing and discovery of services, of the service calls, I think in the early days we were using ELBs. I need to correct that. Later on, ALBs. Combined with Route 53, so the services themselves are completely agnostic of the service landscape. It's an internal hosted zone. They just call that one magic URL, and then their calls end up where they are supposed to go. We used CloudWatch for logs of those services. So there's a wonderful plugin for Docker that just dumps all your logs directly into CloudWatch logs. For monitoring, it's the same. We could reuse a lot of the load balancer alarming and monitoring. Added some more, and there was already a really nice metric suite that gave you a good idea of what's happening right now. Apart from that, learning from our couch experience, I think today it might still live in some shadowy corner of one of our old VPCs, but it serves basically 1 or 2 requests from time to time, so the reaping will soon come. But learning from that, well, we embraced and adopted AWS managed services, specifically managed persistence. Included a lot of learning, kind of the primary persistence that we are using at the moment is DynamoDB, RDS, and Aurora friends. Yeah, and S3 if you want to call that persistence. Depending on use case, depending on lovely talks about what went wrong with which service in which use case, using that. The other part is we started, well, using CloudFront. We'll come to that in a second, why. And huge evolutionary step, which made a lot of things easier, went from Docker, from pure and native Docker to Docker Swarm. So basically, allowing us to do the orchestrating and the scheduling of our different microservices instead of Docker Swarm. Also happy for a lot of discussions, Kubes versus Docker Swarm afterwards. I'm a strong Swarm defender, and I'm intrigued what we will bring up, Kubes guys. Exactly. So, apart from that, looking more into the DevOps area, I brought like the little roundhouse kick. So kind of the aeons get longer and longer in terms of content because we did more and more. One thing is basically CI/CD, all topic, very abstract overview. I will fill in the gaps of what we need. How does CI/CD look like? Well, it starts to the left. I have a pointer, but it doesn't point. Version control system to the left. This is where your code lives. We use GitHub for that. You plug in your code, you change something, you push it up. GitHub sends a lovely webhook probably to a CI service. I would call it a build service because CI is kind of misused very often. Anyway, that guy pulls in the source, applies all those lovely tests, builds your artifact, and then pushes, deploys, publishes that to your artifact repository. And then in this case, in this example, the CI service itself would basically say, please deploy that to the world. The other option for us is basically asking our beloved Stobot to basically deploy this and that version at this Git ref to that environment, and snap, things are starting to happen. What happens when you do that? Well, basically, someone tells the execution environment, in our case, Docker Swarm, to fetch that artifact and make it run. CI/CD, very powerful pattern. The more automation there is in place, the less overhead for deploys. The more deploys, the faster you get input, learning, cycle. Good. Another thing in the DevOps scope, and also kind of relevant for the operational part, also for the security part, is the concept of immutable infrastructure. Immutable infrastructure has this famous quote of servers are cattle, not pets, so you should not name your servers, you should not give them cozy names. We had whiskey bottles as a name for quite some time. And the metaphor goes sideways if you start, but what is if one of your beloved cattle cows is ill, so you send it to the butcher, and then you're out of the scope where you can tell children of what you are doing. So I use a different metaphor, but I just realized I can also not tell children that one. I always say servers are syringes. Because you have a very, very strong drive to not reuse it. You want to use it one time, inject whatever medicine you're taking, and then throw the thing away. Same thing for service. Use it for its purpose, and after that, throw it away. So no live patching, no live hacking, no live at all, if possible. There are cases for sure, but in general, nothing on those servers. Yeah, the recipe is easy. You spawn your info from a template or a recipe. You have like a little cookbook, and you say, well, I want to have one of those Docker application services. Then you say, throw it out. Dear Amazon, create an EC2 instance. And now I take my little scriptlet, and it creates everything I need for me. The process for changing or updating, because, well, if we disallow doing it, or if it's immutable, how should we change it? Well, the idea is that you update that recipe, then you test that recipe. test like you can test it statically, you can test it dynamically, a lot of stuff you can test. Then you spawn the new one, change your wiring, your routing, trash the old one, win. Benefits of immutable infrastructure, another discussion of maybe 15 minutes. Happy to take that offline too. Immutable infrastructure is cool. What is even more cool is infrastructure as code. That takes that concept of recipes, of definitions that are machine readable, that are reproducible, one step further. So what is the idea of infrastructure as code? It's that you can manage and provision, well, data centers in very strong quotes, because we are in the clouds, right? Through machine readable definition files. So there are different approaches for that. CloudFormation being a very famous one. Terraform is one of the other players. Amazon, currently in early preview or in preview, has the CDK, the Cloud Development Kit, where you can basically specify your infrastructure, basically for us in our native language in JavaScript. So a lot of stuff going on, really interesting. The amazing thing of that idea that you are kind of CI/CDing your infrastructure. So it's not your service, it's your whole, the whole thing. It brings a lot of amazing properties. So suddenly you can version control your infrastructure. You can create pull requests to add something to your infrastructure. That blew my mind in the early days, but yeah, it works. Enable your CI server to basically roll out infra to AWS, and you have pull requests for infra. Amazing. Documentation. Not if machines can read it, then in many cases for those tools you can read that too. You can pull request or merge request, whatever you are using that stuff. You can use git praise or git blame to find out which part came from which time and who added it. You can travel through the time and see the evolution of that stuff. And then one step further, we talked about the CI server doing testing and builds. You can also do testing on your infrastructure. So static analysis, you can start by adding stupid linting rules in a sense for your infrastructure. Like, are the subnets that I use properly referenced? Is there some security group that is too open to the world, maybe? Then have a linter warning, and people can fix that on the fly. Wonderful concept. To the right, a very good structure of an example I found. Another topic to discuss offline, if you want to get into that. Now we come to the part where CloudFront comes into play, and also maybe stemmed from a fail or learning. Naive in the early times, we were like, yeah, sure. On the one hand, we want to personalize the UX, the user experience, for each of our users. Our users make it pretty easy for us, as by storing their loyalty cards, that the clients have quite a good idea of what the user might be interested in, right? So if you have an IKEA card, if you have IKEA is very generic. If you have a Miles & More card, a Hilton Honors card, and a Qantas card, you're probably somehow a business travel-y person. If you have a grocery card of your choice, and I don't know, your DM card and stuff like that, you're probably more of the household high-frequency shopping type. Based on that, it's very, easy to compile lists of content for you. So what is the user information that you're interested in? Early days, that was all done on our beloved, back then not Swarm, but on our services. And with more and more user growth, of course, they kind of were swamped with requests, and it was really annoying. So what we adopted then is basically CloudFront, surprise, content delivery. We had content, we wanted it delivered. Ding, check mark. How do we do it? Basically, each and every one of our content items, I call them, is cached inside of CloudFront individually. And then what our backend does only is delivering the kind of information. So you got cards ABC. Well, here's contents D, E, F, G, I, whatever. And then the details of the content, whoop, inhale it from CloudFront. All right. we're nearing the current times. The message-archian era. I talked about the communications that our service was using. Primarily, they were using, well, REST calls and cascading REST calls at that. And now we can dig deep into dependability and reliability engineering. If you start chaining services that have a .99 reliability and you're at 5, I think that you're already at 95%, and it just goes sideways from there. Also, if you start to parallelize things. So what we saw is a lot of funny failure and error patterns and behaviors, like errors cascade, of course, but then systems can start to modulate. They can start to swing. So one service is recovering, the other one is also recovering, swamping it again, and led to, we always called it Friday evening DevOps party, because Friday evening is the time of the day when users like to get pushes and like to get their content, and is usually not the time of the week where you, as a DevOps person, want to stay long in the office and maybe drink beer while doing that. There's a lot of technologies or approaches to counteract that. Netflix actually has a lot of great content and technology for that. So circuit breakers, extensive caching, feeding back monitoring and metrics into the load balancing, etc., etc. But what we realized is that we had a lot of our communication on REST. Huge parts of the communication on REST where REST, or this very synchronous way of doing things, was not needed. So what we did is basically, well, adopted a message-based architecture, not for everything, but for huge parts. Using AMQP, SQS, NSNS, Lambda, probably the core technologies behind that. Core of that age, give a little example in a second. The other part of the current age is that our self-hosted Docker Swarm is not having CouchDB moments, but it feels like it's time to move on. So also looking into ECS, EKS, Fargate, playing around there and seeing how things work. Also learning, as our storebot is quite flexible in what he does and what he supports, it was really easy for us to plug different things in and see how it performs. At the moment, I think we have some stuff still on Docker Swarm, some services on Fargate, and it's just a little bit of config juggling, and you get your stuff wherever you like it. Quick example to message-based architecture. Let's imagine a client, a mobile client, I like those icons, stores something in a in our backend, oversimplification, in the database. The database emits a lovely event. In that case, actually, that's the official SQS queue icon. A lot of different workers can listen to that. In that case, let's imagine a Lambda function. Our client did store, I don't know, a new loyalty card. So what would be interesting is to update the content that he is allowed to get. To stay in the example, what does the Lambda guy do? He computes something, puts it back into the database, and when the client comes around the next time, or if you want it urgent, if you poke the client, he can just get that stuff, and you have no blocking REST calls or other stuff in that scenario. Of course, this is horribly oversimplified, but this is your prototypical message-based architecture approach. All right, which brings us to, well, the future, into the mobile Paymozoic aeon, which is basically a look forward. So after we tackled the use case or that part of your wallet that deals with loyalty cards, we thought it might be time to also enter the paymentscape space. Sounds easy. It is. No, just kidding. Mobile payment, wonderful topic, really interesting. For us, it brought a lot of new challenges, which was exciting. On the one hand, we suddenly have a lot of requirements from different parties. Compliance, regulatory stuff, things that our vendors basically ask us to implement. We have an integration surface and depth with third parties that we haven't had before, so also a lot to learn here. And for security, basically by smacking a mobile payment sticker on our app, we basically, well, the crosshair on our back just got gigantically bigger. A learning, without going back very deep into that thing, is Amazon was a major, well, Amazon Web Services, major, well, facilitator, supporter in dealing with all of these requirements. All of these services you see here is basically stuff that we could more or less find, configure, click a button, and checkmark one of the concerns that we have. Starting with IPsec VPN setups, going further to proper secret management, web application firewalls, guard duty, wonderful tool, AWS organizations to well, compartmentalize our AWS landscape, and a lot of other monitoring, audit trailing, and other tools. We identified the requirements that we had, and then, as I said, the process was find it, check if it works, maybe have a call with our beloved AWS contacts, press the button, and here you go, that's it. It was amazing plug-and-play experience, and also allowed us to focus on what we think we do good, which no, we are quite confident we do that good, which is creating great products, a great user experience. Something that users like to press stuff on. So you have something to look forward for after you installed Stocard, everyone minus the 5 people that raised their hands. And then you can wait for it. All right, famous last words. Growth is challenging, that's a fact. Growth is tackleable. Scaling should not be contained to your infrastructure. Like, it's not like, I enabled auto-scaling, now we are scaling very rapidly. It involves your whole company. So think in wider terms, take off your look-forward goggles and look at the big picture. Be careful and aware, especially if you're in extreme scaling mode. Devops was an extreme facilitator for us in being able to handle that. Yeah, and in this instance, have the right partner to accompany you on your trip. In our case, you might guess who that was. The lovely guys from AWS helped us a lot, and they continue to helping us. That's it. So I close with the words, hail the Hypnotoad, and if you have questions, I think we are out of time, so find me offline. Otherwise, thank you very much. So, 2:45. Yeah, we'll take it offline. Just pop over.